Shri Guru Bhyo Namah. Well, I'm very happy to be here. I am thankful to Srijan Foundation that they have given me this opportunity. Of course, I'm thankful to Vidya Rao. Now, the subject today is this particular book, right? Against the Dharma. You are all familiar with the subject because it has been widely circulated. The first question that arises is why am I speaking and why am I making you listen to on this book? Can't we just forget it? Somebody writes against Dharma, somebody writes against God, somebody writes against uh, maybe the idea of India or the nation of India. So, should we not just ignore and continue to do our good work and not pay attention to such uh, mudslinging or such difference of opinion, whatever you may like to call it? Now, there is a section among us, that is among us Indians and Hindus in particular, which says just do positive work. Don't get into these arguments. The more you speak about these things, you provide them publicity. You bring them into the discourse and into limelight, and therefore you contribute to their power. Now, that argument, of course, is true in the sense that when you talk about something, then the thing gets into limelight and gets more attention. However, there is a big need to understand who is saying what and for what reason. Secondly, when we say that we want to do positive things, then anything positive is also related to something negative. You see, in this sansar or in this world, nothing is just positive. There is raga and dvesha. There is a guna and dosha. There is a vidhi, that is how it is to be done, and there is nishedha, how it is not to be done. There is no way that they can be just thinking of one kind. So the same thing applies in our thinking process. The same thing applies to books. The same thing applies to any art form. When you have artists sitting here and they would say there is one good way of doing and there is another bad way of doing art. So similarly in the books. Now, having said this, how do I go into a greater detail as to why have I chosen this book? Well, apart from the fact that last month or 2 months ago, I had gone to Chicago to give some lectures, and it is in the university bookstore that this book was seen by me and a friend. He said, "You must carefully read this book." He also just saw it, and so he purchased this book and gave it to me, and he said, "Now you better read it and give a reaction." Now that is the material part of how it happened. But as I read through the book, and I read through the whole book very carefully, I found that there is a deep reason for us to think about this book. Not only because Wendy Doniger is one of the famous American Indologist names who has a lot to say about India and who has written a huge number of books and who has quite a few followers in India also. Not only because of that reason, but because we better understand what is our own tradition, what is our real tradition, and whatever is being said by others, others in the sense those who don't live in India, or maybe those who are not professing Indian darshanas or Hinduism, uh, maybe they are not, so to speak, one of us, even if they are outsiders. We should very carefully try to understand what is being projected by them. And it should be done with an open mind. It should not be done with a initial prejudice that he is a foreigner or she is an outsider and what do they know. We should not have that attitude at all. We should be very open and just see what is being said. Is that right or wrong? That should be the only criteria. So, when I am going to offer a critique of this book, my only concern is that is the thesis of Wendy Doniger right or wrong? And what is her thesis? Why has she written this book? This is the most important thing. Now, I'll just summarize something about the book. That is, what does she have to submit? What does she have to say? You see, when you look at the backside of this book, you find that on this blurb, there are a few comments by some very well-known people. There is somebody called Donald R. Davis, who is a well-known Indologist, and he says, Wendy Doniger does it again. A book I hate to love because it challenges my own work and demands that we all reconsider the resistance to self-righteous moralizing offered by the ancient Indian treatises on sex and politics. So the idea here is that she is to be listened and that there is a lot of moralizing in Arthashastra and Kama Sutra, the cardinal texts of politics or statecraft, and Kama Sutra, the text of erotic arts or sexuality. Then another by a very great man called Patrick Olivelle, who is a very famous scholar of Dharma Shastras, a groundbreaking book. Wendy Doniger subverts accepted notions of Dharma using the prism of Arthashastra and Kama Shastra. This is not simply original within quotations. Nothing like this has ever been done before. So this scholar says that this is a miraculously fresh insight. Now, this is of course the prashasti, the good things said about the book. So we begin with the good things about the book, as said by the people from that part of the world, scholars from that part of the world. And I'm sure that because this has just come out, within a couple of months, from this part of the world also there will be a chorus which would say very similar things. I even have names in mind who would say it, but I don't want to bring in those names. Now, what does the book propose? Very briefly, it says that Arthashastra and Kama Shastra are against the Dharma Shastras. Now, Dharma Shastras, are written to talk about what should be the ideal conduct, the dharmic conduct of a person. She proposes that Arthashastra and Kama Shastra may offer lip service or pretentious praise or acceptance of the idea of dharma, but in reality, they subvert it. They don't believe it. This is her thesis. Now, I'm going to read out what she has to say in her own words, right? That is something which is also done very often. Let me say a few things which would make the subject a little simpler for you. Because that will give you the framework. The framework is this, that in India, for a very long time, we have believed that there are four aims of life: Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. Now, this enumeration was in the beginning only for three: Dharma, Artha, and Kama. Moksha was a little later added as an extension of Dharma or as a culmination of the three. It was called Chaturvarga, right? To make the number four important, like the four Varanas, the four Ashramas, and therefore the four Vargas or Purusharthas, the aims of life. But earlier it was three Varga: Dharma, Artha, and Kama. So she is talking about that period or that set of texts. So she says there is Dharma, and Dharma is to be found, stated, and enunciated in the Smritis, or what is called the Dharma Shastra, like Manu, like Yagyavalkya, like so many others, right up to Deval, something like almost 150 texts, Smritis, which are called Smriti. And before the Smritis, there were sutras called the Griha Sutras, which meant the same kind of conduct which was to be adopted by a Hindu, a person, for conducting his or her life. That these are my aims in life: Dharma, Artha, and Kama. And I have to fulfill all these three. All these three are important. This was the classical Indian format. And it was said that Dharma is supreme, Dharmo Rakshati Rakshitaha. If we follow Dharma, then Dharma provides us protection. If we protect it, it provides us protection. Then there is Artha. And Artha just doesn't mean money only. It means collecting all the material wealth. Because if you have to live in life, you need material wealth. And what do you need material wealth? In order to be happy. So in order to be happy, you eat good food, you have an erotic life, you live nicely, you make cities which are beautiful, you plant gardens, and all this is called Kama. So Dharma, Artha, and Kama, these are the three aims of life, or human activity is divided into them, and there should be a balance between the three. Right? There should be a balance. Kama Shastra, Vatsyayan says very clearly that when we are pursuing one, we should not neglect or harm the other two. In practical terms, you should collect wealth, you should work hard, you should fulfill your desires, and you should also be dharmic. You should give charity, you should do swadhyaya, etc., etc. And you should not overdo one to the extent that you neglect. That I am doing my meditation today, but it is time for me to go to the court in order to defend my wealth, and I don't go. And hence I lose the case and my wealth is taken away by the opponent. So this is what he means, a practical example. There should be a balance between all these three. I should not pursue one to the exclusion of others. This is what Kama Shastra says. of all things. Wendy Doniger does mention that, but she doesn't pay attention to it. Or the way she pays attention to it is to say that this is only lip service. Vatsyayan doesn't really mean it, he only says it. You see? Now, this is the refrain of the whole book that none of the two, Chanakya and Vatsyayan, really respect Dharma. They want to say things in praise of Dharma because otherwise people would not let them live or even accept them or even read their books. So they pay lip service, they just do it as a matter of pretension. Like what she means is that just as present day political parties make promises and never mean to fulfill it, similarly they praise Dharma but they don't have any faith in Dharma. But they have faith in something else. This is her offering. So, the question is this correct or not? Let me amplify a little more in her own words. What is the whole thing? My argument is that these two texts, that is Chanakya's Arthashastra, right, and Vatsyayan, ideologically closely related, that is, they are very close to each other, advocate blatant transgressions against Dharma. Though both texts developed mechanisms to allow them to pay superficial lip service to Dharma, they are evidence of a steady stream of subversive ideas that were maintained by certain Brahmins in the face of disapproval of other Brahmins. This undermining of the dominant social and religious order by secular scientific disciplines was continued in a most ingenious and devious way by creation of a mythology about wicked skeptics and materialists. Let me just make it a little simple for you. The first part you must have understood that both Chanakya and Vatsyayan don't really have any faith in Dharma. They are only promoting a subversion of it. And actually, these people are materialists. They are some sort of Nastikas. And she equates them with a scientific thinking. You see, this undermining of the dominant social and religious order by secular scientific discipline was continued in the most ingenious manner. How? By imagining that there were Charavaks, that they were materialists. Actually, the materialists, according to Doniger, never existed, but they imagined a character, a Charavak character, a materialist who believed that there is no punya, there is no dharma, there is no adharma, you don't have to do ancestor worship, etc., etc. And they created these imaginary characters just for the sake of argument. You see, if somebody says that dharma is all nonsense as you define it by giving charity or following the yag, so you create a character so that you can oppose the character. So her argument is that there were no Charavaks in reality. Most probably there were none. And the Brahmins created the Charavaks so that they could create a character to argue with. Just as in a film, you create a villain. You create a rapist so that the hero comes and rescues the poor girl, or if she has been raped, then he falls in love and marries her. Whatever technique you adopt, the bad man is only there to praise the good man. The Ravan is there only to praise the Rama. That is the technique we adopt in theatre. So she says that Charavak versus the Astikas, or those who believe in the Vedic values, is a drama. Charavaks never existed. The Vedic Brahmins created an imaginary story of Charavaks, and so that they could argue and assert their values. Then she goes on to another extreme. You see, this paragraph summarizes the whole book. That's why I'm reading it. A mythology about wicked skeptics and materialists, Charavaks and Lokayats, whose words were always cited with shock and disapproval, but always kept alive in the Hindu tradition. The subsequent history of India, particularly under colonization, that is under the British colonization, she doesn't believe that Islam colonized India, has led to the present day undermining of science by a religious government. So now she brings in Narendra Modi. She says the present religious government is subverting the scientific tradition. Just as the Brahmins were subverting the Charavaks, and they had created the Charavaks only in order to refute them, similarly, all scientific thought, and Charavak thought is scientific thought, Gnostic thought is scientific thought, Marxist thought is scientific thought. This is her presumption. Similarly, Narendra Modi is now the present government. I am not making up any accusation, I am just reading out. By a religious government. I mean, most of us are surprised to hear that Narendra Modi has a religious government. Most Hindus are complaining that he has done nothing for religious growth.
I'm looking for one.
Most Hindus, including me, they are complaining that he has done nothing for Hindus. Now, whether this is right or wrong, good or bad, that's nothing for us to talk about. But it's a fact. However, Wendy Doniger is convinced that Narendra Modi is a religious government and is a religious threat, and he is subverting scientific thinking in India, just as Brahmins were earlier subverting the Charavaks who were scientific. Right? So, we can better understand the subversion of science by religion under the present Indian theocracy.
Theocracy.
Yeah. So RSS, Narendra Modi, BJP is a theocracy. While most of their voters are complaining that they have done nothing for Hinduism. By going back to trace the history of subversion of religion by science, first in the two classical texts of politics and erotics, and then the subsequent history of dissension against Dharma in India. So, dissension against Dharma is a scientific tradition. To oppose Dharma is scientific. You can see the whole ideological background of this book. And what is this book on? Now, having given you the thesis, or what may be called the Purva Paksha of Wendy Doniger, let me go deeper into her statements. Before we examine whether she is talking right or wrong, let us say, what is she aiming at? Now, I have described that the two texts, Arthashastra and Kamshastra, they are about two major Purusharthas. How does she prove, how does she go about saying that these two Shastras are subverting? What evidence does she give from Arthashastra and from Kama Sutra to substantiate, to say that they are really subverting Dharma? The evidence she gives is of the tricks that Chanakya prescribes for the king to conquer another king. You see, in any administration, there are certain secret things which are done, right? Let us say, like a surgical strike. All right. Let's continue something from the religious government of Narendra Modi. So, surgical strike was subversion of dharma by Narendra Modi, isn't it? I mean, she's not saying it, but I am applying her logic. Because surgical strike was secretly done, actually, according to Dharma, we should have made a declaration. Good Pakistanis, we are coming. Prepare yourself. We will come. Such and such date, such and such time. Be prepared. Then we have a Dharma Yuddha. Huh? This is the logic. That Chanakya prescribes so many things that you should have spies, you should have Vishakanyas. He prescribes that there are beautiful women, dancers and musicians who are sent into the enemy territory and they make a honey trap, what is called today a honey trap, and they poison the other king or minister and they do this subversive. So Chanakya is full of such things. Chanakya is describing many such things. So she says, this is adharmic. How is he doing this? Similarly, she says that Kama Sutra also prescribes many things, like how to seduce a neighbor's wife. Now, it is true that Kama Sutra does prescribe that you can seduce your neighbor's wife, and these such and such kind of women, they can be seduced. They are amenable to seduction for this reason. So you should be able to watch it. And if you are going to approach a woman of this kind, then he prescribes certain tricks that instead of talking to her, you should talk to the child, her child, give a toy to the child or be friends with the child so that you can make your way into the heart of the woman. He does all these kinds of tricks. This is true. It's not that Wendy is falsely talking about. These things are there. All right. Now, the question is, if these tricks or if these methods are there either in Kama Sutra or in Artha Shastra, then should we simply say that these two texts are adharmic? Let us see what these texts are about. What is the purpose of these texts? And is this thing which is prescribed here, which may appear as adharmic, is this thing in the long run not benefiting the state, the citizens, and the person as a whole? I'll give you another example. Now, it is forbidden for a sannyasi, and even for a modern sannyasi, to touch a woman, right? Yes. But suppose if a sannyasi is standing on the banks of a river and he sees a drowning woman, should he just close his eyes and look away? No. He should jump into the water, grab the woman, bring her out, put her on the bank, and go his way. So, if Wendy Doniger comes around and says, oh, you touched a woman, this is against Dharma. Now, I am sure Wendy Doniger also understands what is described in the classical text as apad dharma, emergency. It's a case of emergency. It becomes adharma only if the sannyasi starts proposing to the woman, right? Otherwise, to save her life, to touch her or to embrace her for whatever period of time it is necessary is dharma. So the question is that should the state not have these practices? Should the state not have honey traps? See, should the state always follow the highest ideal? That is not part of the Hindu thinking. I mean, that was part of Mahatma Gandhi's thinking, who prescribed to the Jews that they should surrender to the Nazis, and to Hindu women who were being raped in Pakistan to close their eyes and not hate their tormentors and rapists. But it is not part of the classical or medieval Hindu thought. The idea is that there are certain occasions in which you have to transgress certain written laws. Another example, do you think Vali could have been killed if Ram had stood in front of him? No, because Vali had this vara boon, this vara, that whosoever will stand in front of him would lose half his strength. So it was necessary for Ram, it was necessary for Narasimha to become Narasimha. Otherwise, he had this boon that he would be killed neither by an animal nor by a human. So it had to be a combination of human. It had to be a hybrid. Karna had to be killed, otherwise, while he was taking the chariot wheel, replete. It's not just with Arthashastra. It is not just with Kama Shastra. It is not just with these two texts that these so-called not just apad dharmas but way outs prescribe. This is part of the very simple tradition in India that there are situations in which you have to commit violence. If you are being attacked by somebody who does not understand the language of peace or who does not have any faith in peace or in good logical reasoning, then, and who if he's attacking you, then you have to attack and you have to kill, and maybe you have to kill him before he kills you, or kill her before you kill, her. After all, Bhishma was taken advantage of by sending Shikhandi. Right? The question is, what was Bhishma doing? He was on the side of adharma. He had used all his strength on adharma. What was Ravana doing, who had a fountain of amrita in his belly button or in his navi? He was on the side of adharma. So he had all these things on the side of adharma, and therefore, on certain occasions, there have to be exceptional behavior. This is an accepted norm in Hindu thought, and it cannot be just traced to these two texts, Arthashastra. This is something which I am sure Wendy Doniger is very well aware of, and she understands, and she discusses and makes these references. So the question is, what is she aiming at? Well, logically, it cannot be faulted. Now, take the case of Kama Sutra. It is a little easy for you to understand and accept that the king will have honey traps for the enemy. All right? Or the king would sometimes kill an army which is kind of running away, which according to the highest standard should not be attacked when they are retreating or running away and not exterminated. But according to Chanakya, it should be so that they don't come back after something like 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 2 years or 3 years. So Muhammad Ghori, if he had been eliminated in the first round, would not have come back if they had listened to Chanakya. It is easy to understand that. But the question then comes about Kama Sutra. Now let me talk a little about Kama Sutra and the world of Kama Sutra and India before 10th century. You see, India up to 10th century did not have the same kind of sexual behavior norms that we have today. Our norms today are, as a matter of fact, entirely Christian norms. Because, monogamy was very largely a Christian invention. Before Christianity, nowhere in the world men were monogamous. Huh? Men can feel happy, women can feel unhappy at this news, but this is history, right? Monogamy was introduced into this world by Christianity. There were exceptions like Dasharatha's son Rama, but by and large, there was no monogamy. Then, sexual life was not limited to the husband and wife, the grihastha. The male, he could go to the house of the courtesan. And to go to the house of the courtesan, to spend time, to spend money, if you could afford it, was not considered bad, but it was considered as something very nice, something very good. And it was part of the social system. There were huge courtesan houses, and courtesan houses in which, in the better type, arts and crafts and poetry and dance and music were greatly patronized, and these were places where young men were sent to learn good behavior, to appreciate what is sexuality, to understand what is Shringara. All this was part of the system. And Kama Sutra belongs to that. You see, the only thing that Wendy Doniger sees in either the Arthashastra or the Kama Sutra are the tricks. It is the abnormal contradiction of Dharma. The Kama Sutra is not just about that. The Kama Sutra is also about how you should behave with your wife, how you should treat your official Kulavadhu. It is also about how you should go to a prostitute's house, what are the norms of it, what is the norm of behavior at that time. It is also about city festivals. It is about cultivating the 64 arts. It is about many other kinds of behaviors. It is about accepting homosexuals. It is about many kinds of sexuality on many things. It's not just about seducing the neighbor's wife. But she just takes these things where something abnormal or something tricks or something which is sanctioned to be given. Now, Kama Sutra is about human beings as they are. See, the Hindu system, the Indian philosophic system, does not demand of you to live only by the highest ideal. Because to live by the highest ideal all the time is neither possible nor natural. So, of all people, coming from America, Wendy Doniger should understand that the American president is allowed, what was that lady? Monica, Whereas in practice, he is denounced for that. So there is, double morality as part of the Puritan system in America. India did not have this Puritan system. It was said, yes, these are kings. They have come to earn a lot of wealth. Every king was not supposed to be, was not expected to be Rama. Of course, Rama is the ideal. If you can be Rama, nothing like it, because then your Rajya would become Rama Rajya. So Dharma prescribes, Dharma suggests that be like Ram, so that your kingdom becomes Rama Rajya. And therefore Manu prescribes that, and something which present day politicians would really benefit from, he prescribes that the first thing the king should do in the morning is to go to the learned people, call them, discuss things with them, and employ them in certain services of the state. Now, this is the idea. But then, if you do it, then you will have Ramarajya. But the Shastrakaras understand that most kings are not going to be this way. And the Shastrakaras don't want their kings to be Bill Clintons. Do one thing, profess another thing, and the nation goes mad about the immorality of the president, when the nation knows that this cannot be and the nation itself is not practicing it. So, the Kama Shastra is about sex for the ordinary man, not for the Tyagi, not for somebody who has outgrown sexuality and Shringar. It is about those who are part of Shringar, who love Shringar, who are, some of them, addicted to Shringar. And everybody, it is said, should be for a period of time Shringaric, because that's how you are going to procreate. That's how society will multiply. And what is the best way to do it? Then there will be certain situations in which it is better not to follow the highest morality, but to have a standard which is much lower. And Vatsyayan has all kinds of prescriptions for that also. In other words, Vatsyayan is giving behavior by different levels of people and behavior of a man who may be in different stages of development. It is not giving commandments. Thou shalt not commit adultery, period. Because Vatsyayan understand that men and women will commit adultery. If a king has, let us say, 10 wives, and if the king is away most of the time, and if the king is addicted to only one out of the 10, then the 9 will have to commit adultery sometime or the other in order to survive as women. Otherwise, they'll become neurotics. Isn't this true? So Vatsyayan prescribes what should those women do when they don't have men. What are the dildos and other equipment, sexual equipment they can use? So he is realistic. He is not prescribing the highest ideal. What Wendy Doniger is doing is, she is demanding that there should be only one highest ideal of Dharma which is prescribed in Manu. Now, Manu is writing the Dharma Shastra, or the Dharma Shastris like Yagyavalk, etc. They are writing about what is called the Samanya Dharma, which is the highest idea. This is how people should behave. But then they know that people will not all the time behave that. So they give certain concessions. Now, to give a concession is not to contradict or to demolish your own ideas. I'm sure Wendy Doniger knows this. Then why is she doing this? Why is she writing this? I'll tell you why she's writing this. The purpose of these two books is, and all the analysis which is given in this particular book called Against Dharma, which I think somebody told me, I don't know how true, is being published in India under a different title called Beyond Dharma.
Yes.
I heard, I don't know how true that is. The purpose of this book is really to attack the concept of Trivarga, Dharma, Artha, Kam. The ideal of Dharma, Artha, Kam and the balance of life which was prescribed in classical times, that needs to be demolished by them. By them I mean a certain school of American Indologists and Wendy Doniger in particular. The attack is not just on Vatsyayan or on Chanakya. The attack is on the whole philosophy, the whole idea of Trivarga. What is Trivarga? And what is this flexibility? Now, if you see, this is a general problem with the Christian colonizers. You see, when they came to India in the 16th, 17th century, they saw all these things as contradictions. Everything appeared to them as a contradiction, because in their own tradition, their prescriptions of morality are only in black and white. Thou shalt and thou shalt not. There is nothing like thou shalt sometimes do this also. Now, what is considered by us as a real surviving technique and enjoying technique of life is considered by them as lack of morality. For them, that concession is against Dharma, whereas for India it is not against Dharma. Now, this also does not mean that you will not follow the ideal or look upon the ideal, that you will all the time find excuses in order to be adharmic. Because Dharma is stated very clearly. But for Wendy Doniger, that statement of Dharma, even by Chanakya and by Vatsyayan, is therefore called hypocritical. That they are paying only lip service. And they are actually Charvaks. Now the whole thing, that the whole thesis that Chanakya and Vatsyayan belong to a Nastik Charvak tradition is a fabrication of her mind. Nobody in the earlier texts has ever given such indication. Secondly, she creates another fantasy that Charvaks were never real. Now, I don't understand how that can happen. It is true that we do not have a living tradition of Charvakas. You know, there is no mutt in India today which says that I belong to the Charvak Parampara, my Guru was so and so, and his Guru was so and so, and I am now the Guru, and you become my disciple, and we will have Charvak. That, of course, has taken root in India in the last 100 years, and these Charvaks are called Marxist. And we know this, and they also admit it.
Yeah.
They say that we are materialists, and in India there were materialists called Charvakas. We belong to that. But it is not a living tradition, it is now an imported tradition. Marxists are an imported tradition. So, to believe that Charvaks never existed and the Astikas or the Brahmins constructed Charvaks as a mythical character is again a flight of imagination that our great Indologist is undertaking. I'm sure that there must have been acharyas and philosophers of the Charvak, the Jabalik, and the Lokayat tradition. And they must have practiced that way of life. Why do I say this? And why Wendy Doniger is wrong? Because in India, we have a very simple principle in the philosophic life that you live your philosophy. Whether your philosophy is right or wrong, that's not the question. You may agree or you may disagree. But whosoever makes a statement will live accordingly. So if Buddha said that do not perform a yaga and do not kill pashu or sacrifice, then he lived that. He preached that. So if there were people who said that there is no God, that there is no afterlife, that there is no punarjanma, bhasmi bhutasya dehasya punaragmanam kuta. If somebody said this, then somebody must have lived accordingly and had a sampradaya for a long time in India. Now, it is true that that sampradaya disappeared because the bulk of the country did not accept that. Now, there are many sampradayas which became extinct. There were Pashupatas. There is no living tradition of Pashupatas. So, should we say that Pashupatas were just a fiction imagined by the opponents of Pashupatas? There were many sects of Buddhism which are not extant today. There are many sects of Vaishnavism which are not extant today. Many paramparas died out. Similarly, Lokayats must have been. What actually Wendy Doniger wants to do is to give a very ostentatious, overworked discourse against the present government. Now, that I find is dishonest. Because if I want to write about my philosophic traditions, that should not be either for the benefit of a political party or against a political party. I, as a Indian, I, as somebody who falls in the line of the Vedic rishis, will examine philosophy, will examine the work of great authors, whether I agree with them or not, whether I follow them philosophically or not. I will, with due respect, look upon them as acharyas, as philosophers, and deal with them philosophically. I will not describe them in order to bolster or oppose a present day political party. That, I think, is a lowering of academic standards. And this is what, in my opinion, this lady has done again and again. So it is basically a politically motivated book which takes the garb of a philosophical analysis. It is not only based upon a distorted understanding of Dharma or a distorted understanding of a need to have different levels of dharmic action, but that it is a political book and we should try to understand it this way. Thank you very much. We can have questions now.